I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Overview for June the 25th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, let us expect your mind alone. And for local information to you, heavy tropical cyclones, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So across the tropics today, we have three systems we're going to talk about. Well, we're going to start in the Atlantic real quick. We have Tropical Storm Cindy here, moving generally northwestwards throughout the tropical Atlantic. And fortunately, the system is staying far northeast of the islands of the Caribbean. Here's the Leeward Islands for reference. And you can see the system is not looking too good as the sun has risen over the region. You can see the low-level circulation here is becoming exposed with all the thunderstorm activity being pushed off towards the eastern side. And this is just a factor of wind shear. You can see, if you look at the little storm that pops off here in between 60 and 59 degrees west of longitude, you can see the top of that thunderstorm get sheared off towards the northeast. And this indicates the general shearing that Cindy is running into. And this is better illustrated in the water vapor loop here. You can see we have a general broad trough axis here west of the storm, and this is bringing general southwesterly flow to the system and keeping that thunderstorm activity away from the low-level circulation. There also may be some dry air being pushed in via this. And you can see this also better on the GFS. Here's a 200 millibar flow showing, again, that general trough axis there with that strong southwesterly flow aloft, shearing away the thunderstorms. And this is going to be something that is going to continue over the next several days, and this will likely lead to Cindy's dissipation, at least opening it up into a trough in most likely scenario. Now, there are some models like the GFS that have tried to show this system possibly redeveloping near Bermuda, but this solution is looking more unlikely as time goes on. Even the GFS in the latest run has really backed off on this scenario. You can see just in the previous run, it had a much stronger system east of Bermuda. Now, this still is a concern for Bermuda. We could still see some adverse impacts from the system. You can see there are some strong winds on the northern side of the system. Now, the good news is a lot of models are showing this not really having strong winds on the western side, but you could still have some gusty conditions as this low moves through. You can see the European shows perhaps those winds getting a bit closer as the low tracks, perhaps a bit further west. But what could help this system redevelop in a scenario that, if it does redevelop, is it is going to be in a general region of good baroclinic supporting. So that's more rather atmospherics playing a role into this system redeveloping rather than tropical characteristics. So I guess in that sense, it could be counted as a more subtropical interaction there. But we have this trough here off the U.S. coastline. This is in a negative tilt orientation, that being from general northwest to southeast orientation. The tilt is not too strong negatively, but it is still negatively tilted. And there is good baroclinic support generally on the southeastern side of these troughs. So that could lead to some support for the system redeveloping. And that's why I think maybe the GFS was keen on developing it, or redeveloping it rather. And you can see you can't see the low. The low doesn't show up on this field, but you can see general flow extending away from the storm, likely from that baroclinic support. In prior runs, this system was stronger on the GFS, but this does also promote a higher shear environment. If I get a sounding over the system, you can see there's some pretty strong shearing, about 20 knots. But the main issue is relative humidity. It's pretty dry on the models here. So I really wouldn't expect a scenario of the system redeveloping. It is certainly a possibility, but either way, impacts are really not going to change either way for Bermuda. We could see some gusty winds and higher seas as this low pushes through, and then we could see this low after that push towards Canada, where we could see some impacts there in Nova Scotia and surrounding areas. Here's a unit chief forecast. You can see general idea here is that the system is going to, as I said, weaken into an open trough. You see, by Monday morning, we're expecting the system to really weaken to a depression and then open trough as it comes towards Bermuda. So if you're in Bermuda, stay tuned to the Bermuda Weather Service. They're going to have the latest information on this system as it comes your way. So we're now going to move to the East Pacific as we look towards two systems potentially developing, and I had satellite imagery up, but I guess I closed my tab, so just a moment as I get this back up. So we've got a lot of thunderstorm activity going on in the East Pacific, which is a bit different to what we've had so far this season. It's June 25th. This, I believe, is now one of the latest starts to the East Pacific hurricane season that we've had on record. The season starts on May 15th, and we've had no tropical cyclones form in the East Pacific. But we're watching two systems, mainly for now, this system generally south of Mexico. And as this system comes generally northwest, we're expecting the system to develop into a tropical depression at least, though there may be some limiting factors for this system. And I'll show you some of those right now. Here's the GFS. Now, in general steering, we're not expecting at least this first system to come towards Mexico, mainly because there's this dominant ridging north of the system, and this is generally going to keep this system moving offshore. Now, the GFS has been very keen on developing this. You can see that development take place pretty quickly here. But one limiting factor, perhaps playing into the European, because the European is not really developing this one too much at all. One of the main factors is sea surface temperatures. They are not very warm where the system develops on the GFS and the European. You can see this system forms generally south of Baja California. And if we get the general location relative to Mexico, or well, central Mexico that is, on this sea surface temperature plot, we can generally get the idea that the system is forming in, let me get a better color, this region here, where sea surface temperatures are not the greatest. And the sea surface temperatures here as well are not too deep, and this is a larger system, as you can see there on the GFS. So it's able to churn up more colder water fairly easy. So this is not very favorable, and this could be the limiting factor for this system. And this could be why the European struggles to develop this system off the coast of Mexico. Now, the good news is, regardless of this system developing, we're not expecting the system again to come towards Mexico. It's going to likely stay out to sea under the influence of that ridge. But that could be a limiting factor for this first system. These temperatures may not be too great. And this is a bit unusual to have cooler sea surface temperatures here this time of year. The oceanic conditions, or oceanic waters off the coastal Baja California and California itself, they're below average this time of year. Typically in an El Nino year like we've got this year, you would have this be above average, but this is a bit of a different year. We have negative anomalies here, so this is keeping some of these sea surface temperatures in this 26-degree isotherm fairly far south, so that is going to be a limiting factor for this system. Now, the main thing to watch really is this second system here that develops off the GFS. Now, this system is under the influence of that ridge still, but if I get a sounding, you'll see the flow throughout the entire troposphere. We've got some southerly or even southwesterly flow near the surface, but we've got easterly flow in the mid to upper levels. The net flow of this is going to carry this system generally towards Mexico, and you'll see that play out on the model here as I play it through. You can see it gets fairly close. However, notice how it's not really strong. While this steering flow is tracking it towards the coastline, it's also a pretty strong shear. You've got, southwesterly flow at the surface, easterly flow, and strong flow with that, about 20 to 25 knots there at the mid to upper levels. That makes for a stronger shear, and I've seen on the GFS in some cases this be a 30-knot plus shear. So that is some good news here for Mexico, that even though this system looks to be more likely than not, at least in relative to the western system to track closer to Mexico, this flow would likely be a shearing flow as well, and it would likely inhibit more intensification from the system. Now, the European is on the side of not really developing that system at all either. You can see we're at hour 90, we've really got nothing, and I can go to the 0Z run here from the European, and you can see even through this, we don't really get any development out of this system. Now, there is also a solution that the CMC is producing, which is having the system form a bit further north, perhaps closer to Central America. And if a scenario like that plays out, we could see the system come into Mexico quicker. And by that point, we could perhaps see maybe a bit more intensification. Conditions may be a little more favorable at that point, but I wouldn't expect a strong system at this time to come into Mexico by any means. The main key messages here are that the first system is obviously going to stay out to sea, but the second system could certainly get close, and we could see some adverse impacts here along the coastline of Mexico and even Central America as the system develops. Now, alongside that, with this first system, while the winds and heavy rain impacts are going to stay offshore, we are likely to see at least some higher surf impacts from the system as it remains offshore. You can see the wave impacts here impacting parts of Mexico and even getting towards Baja California. And we could also have some rip current risks here along the coastline as the system stays offshore. Here's the NHC graphic showing the formation chances. You can see they're giving about 80% odds of the first system developing as it tracks generally northwestwards. They have lowered that since yesterday. Yesterday it was about 90% odds, but I'd imagine they've lowered it due to lower confidence in the system actually being able to form, perhaps due to the sea surface temperatures that I mentioned. And you can see the second system, 50% here. Now this goes through 7 days, and we're looking more day 4 to 7 here for development as this system generally moves northwestwards towards Mexico. That is all that I've got to talk about today. Again, Tropical Storm Cindy moving northeastwards of the Leeward Islands, likely to dissipate into an open trough or open wave, and could bring some adverse impacts to Bermuda as it tracks north, and we're watching several systems in the East Pacific that could develop. The second one in particular could bring some impacts to Mexico as it tracks generally northwest. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.